So without further ado, I want to take a moment to introduce Jeff Frigon. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Hey, Dan, how are you doing? Hi, y'all.
Jeff is coming to us from the Browne Center today at the University of New Hampshire. Longtime AEE member, presenter, and done a variety of work within experiential settings that he'll probably talk about a little bit at the beginning of this webinar. You should know this webinar is actually adapted from a workshop Jeff gave at our international conference in Minneapolis last year. The workshop was so well received, we just had to figure out a way to help get it to more people. This topic is really important. How do we create empathetic, compassionate learning environments for our students? We're really excited to have you here today, Jeff, to help us learn more about that. So take it away.
All right, thanks for having me, and thanks all y'all for participating and spending your the end of perhaps or towards the end of your workday here with me. Before I really get started, Dan mentioned that this is an adaptation from a workshop that I give, and we've done our best, Dan and I, to create something that is as interactive as possible. And for those of you who are familiar with AEE and those of us that present at AEE conferences, doing things online and not in direct proximity with clients and participants is anomalous for us. And it's a really big paradigm shift for me. So one of the most important things that this workshop is about connection. Empathy is based on connecting with other people. So I wanted to give folks a brief chance. If you see the screen, enter the chat and just take a moment. And we want to know who's in the room, as it were. Introduce yourself, what population you work with or who you work for, and if you were to hoard any office supply, what would it be? Personally, I'm all about gator clips. I don't have one within reach, but you know, the big black paper clips, they're awesome for phenomenal variety of reasons and uses. All right, so we've got some middle school folks at a college prep. We've got Knowles, welcome, challenge course. So as Dan mentioned, rather, I work at the Browne Center for Innovative Learning. I'm the Youth and Student Programs Coordinator here, and I'm also adjunct faculty in the Kinesiology Department. And I work with youth, kindergarten through college, doing direct delivery, team building, and social emotional learning and development. My colleagues here at the Browne Center also work with corporate folks in another department, another silo, as it were, and Tara Flippo and I with help run our youth program here. We also do train-the-trainer work with adults. So just to give you a background for myself, a little bit more, I spent a long time doing this kind of work. I've been doing it for 20 years, worked for Outward Bound, working with at-risk and delinquent folks down in Florida, been a high school teacher, and the last few years of my life have been dedicated to empathy and bullying. And so my work has taken me down the road of looking at bullying through rather a preventative rather than a reactive mode. And so instead of trying to figure out, well, in addition to figuring out how to stop it, on the other end, after things have happened, I've really been working on how to prevent. So to create healthy communities that are resilient and tenacious when bullying comes up, because as human beings, it is our nature to be competitive and to maybe not necessarily be so nice, and it is our nature or our job as educators to guide and teach folks of all ages. As adults, it's not called bullying, although it's called harassment. It's something different, but equally as problematic. And so my work has really been focused on empathy and building connectivity. And those of us, it looks like the majority of folks in the room are experiential educators, or perhaps have experience with experiential education. Sorry, it's a lot of experience. The work that we all do as educators is already building the foundations of what I'm talking about. I talk a lot about brain science, and where the research is really starting to show now with brain science about why we do how we know what we know. We know what it's always worked, building connections in healthy communities, but now it's starting to show why. So I bring some brain science into this. And at the end of the presentation, Dan mentioned a follow-up email. I will include some of my favorite activities, and we'll have some Q&A at the end. So here we go. So that was me now. This is me in 1986. So I grew up in a small town in Wyndham, New Hampshire. I'm an only kid. And I am a highly sensitive person, I think is the current preferred term, which as an only child, with a slightly overprotective mom, bless her, that meant that I pretty much had a target on me. I was really sensitive, I was very reactive. It was really easy to upset me. And so teasing, even from my friends, was really easy. They chose to, my friends, it was the good-natured stuff like, maybe putting a grape under my seat at the lunch table so I'd sit on it and walk around with a wet spot on my behind for the day. But I was also the victim of more standard, sort of think old school type bullying, being pushed into puddles, having my books torn out of my hands, my book bag opened and thrown down the hallway. Nicknames, the most tenacious of which, there's still a couple of people, good friends, that tongue-in-cheek refer to me as Skipper. Still don't know where that came from, but Skip was my nickname for a long time. It was not so fun, but it's all good now. So small town, was bullied quite a bit, and actually, you know what? I think the bottom of that picture said 1988, so I stand corrected. Graduated from my small town middle school, where my mom was my teacher. So I not only had to deal with the bullying around, just being kind of vulnerable and sensitive, but I was not really me. I was Mrs. Frigon's kid for a long time. My mom was a 7th grade English teacher. Thankfully, she was popular, so most of the kids didn't give me a whole lot of problems with that. But I wasn't really myself until I hit high school. Once I hit high school, it was a large high school, a place called Pinkerton Academy. It was a regional high school that a bunch of small towns, like where I grew up, sent their kids there. And it wasn't until there that I discovered kind of me. I was able to be Jeff instead of Mrs. Frigon's kid. And so this is me, top left. Notice the Tony Hawk sweeb. Those of you who grew up in the 80s or were aware of the alternative fashions in the 80s, what you can't see is the Doc Martens that I'm wearing. So I got to high school and I found my people, found my tribe, and found some social power for the first time, and I became Jeff rather than Mrs. Frigon's son. And this particular picture is of myself and my Odyssey of the Mind team, and the awards that we won. We went to World Finals in 1990, and that's our teacher leader person, Mrs. Little. All of these guys were the brain trusts. I was the kid with the social skills. Two of these guys went to MIT. This guy went to Syracuse. And this is actually the guy in the middle. That's a 18-inch purple mohawk that he's not allowed to have standing up for the picture. I'm going to tell you all this because for the first time I had power, and a little bit of social power. And these guys were definitely the geek squad. They were nerds. And I am a nerd, was a nerd. I just was a nerd with a girlfriend. So I found myself, for the first time in my life, actually being a bully. Most of it was good-natured, or at least it seemed that way, but some of it turned not so nice. I've since apologized to all these guys, and they were all cool with it and actually didn't really know what I was talking about. But now that I know what bullying is, I was definitely a bully. So a little bit about me. So this has really informed my work. With these kids, I sort of was exposed to a bunch of other more harsh forms of bullying. We had people bring guns to school to perpetrate violence against us because we were different. We were the freaks. I had my friend's car run off the road into a ditch because people didn't like us, didn't like the way we looked, didn't like the way we acted, didn't like that we could use large polysyllabic words, and they didn't know what they meant. So yeah, so that was that. So bullying. The title of the workshop is Bullying, Empathy, and Monkeys. So I wanted to go over really quickly sort of an operational definition of bullying. And like I said, this is based on my work for the last 5 years, going on 6 years now, in the state of New Hampshire. And my definition is one that I use working with schools, specifically to help folks start conversations to sort of get to the bottom of what is bullying, how do we figure out who's the bully, who's the victim. There is no end-all be-all to this. There is a lot of gray area, so please don't hear me saying that this is the only definition, but it is something that I've found sort of I've come to over the years has been really helpful to just start the conversations and start identifying, okay, is this just bad behavior that needs to get dealt with from a disciplinary standpoint, or is this bullying, which at least in New Hampshire requires a significantly different set of circumstances and domino effect of investigation, reporting, all these other kinds of things. So first thing, a single or repeated physical, verbal, written, virtual, or psychological attack or intimidation. Back in my day and before my day, or really even before the event of the internet or social media, it had to be repeated incidents in order to be considered bullying. In the advent of technology and the fact that a single instance of cyberbullying, whether it's texting, Twitter, Snapchat, Yik Yak, Vine, which no longer exists, any of these social media pieces, a single instance can be out there in perpetuity forever for anyone to see. And it's almost impossible to retract the pictures or the videos that get sent out. And so in the state of New Hampshire in 2010, they added the single phrase into our anti-bullying law to help capture that. So verbal, written, virtual, or psychological attack or intimidation. As you can see, there's a lot of gray area with a lot of those words and definitions. Intentionally so, I think. So next piece, bullying. It's intended to cause fear, distress, or harm to the victim. The key word is intent. Most of us who work with youth for a long time or spend a lot of time working with other people, we're really good at being sort of natural lie detectors. We can oftentimes tell when someone's lying to us. Oftentimes we can't. But through asking questions around, is this the first time this has happened? Why did you do this thing? You can flesh out whether or not there is intent. So again, this is to establish whether or not something was bullying or not. And your state might be different, your district might be different, your school might be different. So intended to cause fear, distress, or harm to the victim. In New Hampshire, there's another piece, and I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to go to my next slide. The last sort of big, the triad of things, questions, is, and there's an imbalance of power, psychological or physical, where a more powerful person or persons victimize less powerful ones. So this goes back to intent, this goes back to single or multiple, but this is a really gray area for a lot of folks, the imbalance of power. Power is very much like beauty. It is in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes it's not. So if I get into a row with my best friend and I don't perceive an imbalance of power, but he does because I'm bigger, or he perceives me as having more social power, like when I was in high school rather than when I was in middle school, that could tip the balance between it being bullying or not. then we go back to the question of, was there intent to do harm? If I'm joking around with someone and I say something that's offensive to them and I don't know it's offensive, there's no intent, therefore it's not bullying the first time. If I do it multiple times and I am made aware of the fact, then one could make a reasonable leap to the fact that yes, that is bullying because I've been told and I know what I'm doing. Like I said, slippery slope, lots of gray area, but this is the operational definition. And this is this definition, research has shown, and this is one of the pieces that I'm going to include, Dan and I are going to include at the end. It's a really large research study that was done in 2006, showing that educating people on what exactly bullying is. I know it's sort of stating the obvious, but full depth from administration to coaches outside of school, to faith-based ministry outside of school, to janitors, to youth, letting everybody know exactly what we're talking about helps them make informed decisions about what behavior is appropriate and what behavior is not. Historically, I say back in my day, I was bullied physically. The zero tolerance policy for violence in school has resulted in a dramatic drop in the amount of physical instances of bullying in general. It may not be the case where you work currently or places that you've experienced, but that lack of tolerance for that kind of thing is based on everyone knowing that it's wrong. It may have forced people to be more sneaky, and now reverting to online bullying, media bullying, social media bullying. So there's that. So I want to bring this around to the other piece. I want to start talking about empathy. I want to start getting at the preventative piece, about building connectivity, and learning a little bit more about empathy so that we as educators can then pass this knowledge on to our clients and our students. Empathy, from the Greek, meaning meaning in, and pathos, meaning feeling, and also from the German, and I'm really sorry, I don't speak German, Einfühlung. They came into the English language about the same time, early 1900s. The psychologist Edward Tickner translated from the German feeling into English as empathy, but it also exists in the Greek. So empathy can be defined as a person's ability and to recognize and share the emotions of another person, fictional character, or sentient being. It involves first seeing someone else's situation from their perspective, and second, sharing their emotions, including, if any, their distress, happiness, fear, all these other things. You're going to hear me using some words around mirror neurons here in a few minutes that talks about the second piece. I have a couple of videos that I want to share with y'all, and I'm going to move through and press play. And these are live streaming, so you might see a pop-up that I might need to take care of.
What do we mean when we say empathy or compassion? It's not hard to see that there are several distinct issues. On the one hand, a psychopath doesn't really care about others, but may use their understanding of emotions to get what they want, while autistic people don't have an automatic understanding of others' emotions, even though they do care. On top of...
I want to hit pause there. I have recently been talking with a number of folks with autism and on the spectrum, and I have a lot more information now, but the video is still really relevant, and I would say that what they just said is only about a quarter of the, maybe even less than what the truth is. So there's a lot more exploring to do there.
That how sure you are of another person's feelings depends mostly on how vividly you imagine them, and not on how accurately you perceive their emotions. So what makes us care about others' feelings, and how do we even know what they're feeling in the first place? Suppose you walk by a homeless person on the street and you feel bad. In part, this will be your own personal distress in the situation, which has nothing to do with their emotional state at all, though you might give them 50 cents to take away your guilt. If you're too focused on alleviating your own distress, you'll simply avoid uncomfortable situations and not really try to grok the other person's mental state. In contrast, when you focus on their emotions, you can act altruistically and genuinely feel for them. This sympathy or compassion need not mean feeling the same as them, but rather feeling alongside. So suppose you do want to know what someone else is feeling. How can you tell? Of course, you could ask them, but we're often expected to just know, and anyway, people often hide their feelings or don't consciously know them in the first place. So how do we find out? One approach is logical. You see someone smile, and since you know that people smile when they're happy, you can logically deduce that they must feel happy. This kind of conscious theoretical modeling, or theory, is something autistic people can learn quite well, though it's limited by the difficulty of learning all the nuances of emotional display. Another approach is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. By imagining how you would feel if you were homeless or if you had just reached the summit of Mount Everest, you can guess how someone actually in those situations might feel. But while this simulation theory is easy to do, it quickly breaks down if the other person's personality is different from yours, or if your ideas of life on the streets or at 30,000 feet are just skewed. In addition to these conscious processes, your brain has a kind of emotion reading reflex. As you look at another person, a part of your brain called the mirror neuron system automatically and unconsciously mirrors their facial expressions and body language. When you see a subtle facial expression, this system fires as if you were making the same movement, and you then sense the emotion associated with that expression. Usually, this mirroring is a purely internal response, but sometimes you'll unconsciously mimic other people's posture or facial expressions. Likewise, you can generally tell that the emotion isn't yours, but sometimes you'll experience emotional contagion, like starting to feel happy yourself just by being around someone else who's happy. This leakiness of your perception of others' emotions can actually be very helpful in social situations, as you subconsciously show others that you know how they feel by reflecting their emotions in your own behavior. We don't really yet understand how you distinguish your own emotions from your perception of others' emotions, or why and when this distinction breaks down. But what we do know points towards a new perspective on how we behave in social situations and how we distinguish ourselves from the people around us.
All right. So breaking it down, two kinds of empathy, cognitive empathy and automatic empathy. So empathy that you actually need to engage your brain in. You're thinking about walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And then the part that, the leakiness of emotion, the part that your brain doesn't necessarily have the ability to control. So we're gonna watch another video real quick. Those of you who know Brene Browne's work, if you don't, Brene Browne is awesome. She does a lot of work with empathy, but also a lot of work with vulnerability and shame. You should check out her multiple TED Talks and her books. They're brilliant.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right. So yay, Brene Brown. So the part in there when Brene was talking about it's a vulnerable choice to make an empathetic or an empathic connection with another human being is a vulnerable choice. She's talking about making that jump between the part of empathy that you think about, walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, and the part that you do automatically, and recognizing that you are having that connection with someone else and then interacting with them. That is engaging in a vulnerable act, because if you're seeing someone who's having a bad day, you're having a little bit of a mirror neuron party, and we're going to talk about that in a second, where you're actually feeling sad. That's why we cry at movies. Those of us who, there are folks who cry at movies. I'm one of them all the time. I consider myself to be an empath or a highly sensitive person. Can't read your mind, but I feel what other, thanks Dan, what other folks feel. I can walk into a room and really pick up on that vibe. And so connecting with somebody else can actually be really hard, especially if what they're dealing with I'm afraid of, which I think is really prescient for us in our current climate, at school all the way up through interactions on social media and everything else. So a great video there. So I want to have a brief exercise in cognitive empathy. So I want you all to be thinking about this workshop, this Prezi, and you're going to get a PDF copy of the Prezi, by the way, as not just an active thing, but also a tool that you can replicate with your clients. So this is a way to talk about cognitive empathy. So this is my wife, Steph. Based on your own experience in life, dealing with people, what do you think she's feeling? What about her is informing your reactions? So please take a moment, enter the chat, and share your observations. What is going on with my wife, Steph? And I'm going to put it out there. This is not a good picture of her. She's a lovely, lovely lady. And I do have her permission to use this particular photo because she knows why I'm doing it. So please take a minute and go to the chat and share out. What do you think? What's going on? Why does she look like that? What right now? What's going on with her? So I'm seeing a lot of annoyed, doubting. What did I do? What did I do to her? Nice. Why does everyone always think that it's something I've done? Why? So what's telling you about, what's informing you? So I think you're getting the message, but what are you seeing? Her eyes, yeah, great. Eyebrows, yep, facial expression, the eyes and the mouth. Yes, the pursed mouth, raised eyebrows, looking up. Can anybody figure out what room in our house are we in? Head tilt, yep. Kitchen, yeah. Any guesses to what's going on? Dinner time. Yep, I'd say you're right this time. It's not anything I did though, Portia. She's in the middle of making dinner, holidays. Nice, excellent. All right, so great. A lot of you nailed it. She's got her body language, the tilted eyes, the wide open eyes, the pursed lips, the furrows. If you look at the picture, Steph and I have been together for 13 going on 14 years, married for 9 going on 10. And I've learned that these two lines right here, I refer to those lovingly as the goalposts. If I see the goalposts and more than 2 brow furrows, it's danger, Will Robinson, danger, danger. Like I know to proceed with kid gloves and proceed with caution with my partner, because she's got something going on. You know, maybe she's having a rough day, or maybe I screwed up and she's upset with me. But I know those are my cues, right? So she's my best friend. I know her very well. you all got most of the information. The body language is there. You inferred that she's cooking dinner. You begged her to get a dog, and the dog is having a hard time house training, and she was tired of it. That would have been funny 5 years ago. That would have been true 5 years ago. And trust me, if you think this face is dangerous, you should have seen the one when the dog was doing its business in the middle of the night. Anyway, that's a whole other workshop. But what you don't see, what you don't know, and what none of us know until we make that next step to connect with a person and find out what's going on with them, the cues that you see are our first indication, right? And what you don't know about my wife is that two things, well, a bunch of things, more than two things, many things, hundreds of things, thousands of things. But in this case, Stephanie is an endurance athlete. So she rides her bike for an average of, 3,000 miles a year is what she rides her bike. She and I both do centuries, so 100-mile bike events. So she's pretty much always hungry and borderline like caloric debt. This happens to be about 20 minutes after she got back from a bike ride in January. This is last winter in New England, so it was a fairly warm day, but it was still 45 degrees. Freshly showered, recently fed, but still a little hangry, a little bonky. And we are having house guests. So not the holidays, but we're having guests, and Steph wants to prepare this awesome meal that she's never prepared before. And that awesome meal involves cutting up chicken, which is usually my job because it usually makes her nauseous. But she wants to do it. She said she wanted to do it. And this is actually the picture that I took first. So I snapped this one and then snapped this one. And so you all nailed it. The eyes are like, what are you doing? For real? You're interrupting me. Like, get back to work cleaning the house, you slacker. Like, why are you taking pictures of me? What's going on? And so all that information are things that we don't have until we start seeking for that information. And so talking with our students, specifically with youth, but also with older adults, having these kinds of conversations about when you see people that you know, even if they're not your bestie, and you see them then looking different than what is their baseline, what's their normal, helping folks figure out what the next step is, what's that next cue, what's the next question you can ask, and then if you get information that is setting off alarm bells for you, then what do you do? Do you engage with the person? Do you seek help from a teacher, from a colleague, from a coworker? So this is one of the activities that I use when I'm working with youth. I use the same set of slides with different content for youth as I do with adults. So cognitive empathy. Now I want to talk about monkeys. Talked about the intentional engagement of the brain. These are macaque monkeys. And if you want a lot of laughter, talk about macaque monkeys in a gymnasium full of 400 high school students. It's pretty amusing. These folks were studied by Giacomo Rizzolatti in the University of Parma. And they were studying brainwave patterns, trying to figure out brain morphology and development and patterns. Macaques have brains most similar to our own as humans. And that's why they study them. So they had this one particular monkey hooked up to a brain monitor, and they fed him, and they were recording what was going on in his brain as he was eating. And so they had just finished recording their data, or they were recording their data, and this monkey was sitting there still hooked up to the monitors, and behind the scientists, but in front of the monkey, were his cohort, his tribe, and they were freaking out because this guy was eating and they weren't. And so the scientists, feeding time. So all of a sudden, the monkey that's hooked up with the computer is watching his buddies eat, and he's not eating, but his brain is doing the exact same thing that it was doing a couple minutes ago when he was eating. So the scientists, what is going on? How is this working? How is this possible? So that was the first time that anyone had realized that there's an actual part of our brain that is in charge of empathy. So there's literally a part of our brain, and each person is different. So you put all the people on the planet on a bell curve, everybody's going to be someplace in the middle, out on the edges. Our brains are going to react, some more strongly than others, when we see someone else. And so there's an actual part of us that has these reactions. And then they started doing the same experiments on humans, and they've done a lot of work on this. So mirror neurons, this is the automatic part of empathy. This is the part that the absence of this is part of what makes online and virtual bullying really easy, because the person who's doing the bullying doesn't have to see the reaction. And I know this is really obvious to those of us that think about it, but there's actually, if you think a biological reason, we don't like to feel bad. And so if we're going to be mean to someone, we'd rather be mean to them and not have to suffer the consequences of actually having to see their pain. So that being said, I want to engage in our final video here. And I say party, it's in quotes. So this next video is emotive. It's intentionally emotive. It is by a gentleman named Shane Koizan. I don't know if he still is or not, but he was the poet laureate for Canada. And if you watched the Olympics in Canada a couple years ago, he was in the middle of a stadium with fireworks and dancers and stuff like this, and he recited some spoken word poetry. This is his story. He wrote the poem and then had it crowdsourced by animators of all ages. And he has his own thing, his own business around public speaking and doing anti-bullying work himself. And so as we watch the video, I'm going to ask you all to pay attention to what your emotions are doing. And if you are comfortable sharing that, please do so on the chat. Like, what are your mirror neurons doing? What kind of party are they having? How are you feeling? What's it making you feel? And if you could share that on the chat while we're going, that'd be great. Here we go.
When I was a kid, I used to think that pork chops and karate chops were the same thing. I thought they were both pork chops. And because my grandmother thought it was cute and because they were my favorite, she let me keep doing it. Not really a big deal. One day, before I realized fat kids are not designed to climb trees, I fell out of a tree and bruised the right side of my body. I didn't want to tell my grandmother about it because I was scared I'd get in trouble for playing somewhere I shouldn't have been. A few days later, the gym teacher noticed the bruise and I got sent to the principal's office. From there, I was sent to another small room with a really nice lady who asked me all kinds of questions about my life at home. I saw no reason to lie. As far as I was concerned, life was pretty good. I told her whenever I'm sad, my grandmother gives me karate chops. This led to a full-scale investigation, and I was removed from the house for 3 days, until they finally decided to ask how I got the bruises. News of this silly little story quickly spread through the school, and I earned my first nickname, Pork Chop. To this day, I hate pork chops. I'm not the only kid who grew up this way. Surrounded by people who used to say that rhyme about sticks and stones. As if broken bones hurt more than the names we got called, and we got called them all. So we grew up believing no one would ever fall in love with us. That we'd be lonely forever. That we'd never meet someone to make us feel like the sun was something they built for us in their tool shed. So broken heartstrings bled the blues as we tried to empty ourselves so we would feel nothing. Don't tell me that hurts less than a broken bone. That an ingrown life is something surgeons can cut away. There's no way for it to metastasize. It does. She was 8 years old. Our first day of grade 3 when she got called ugly. We both got moved to the back of class so we could stop getting bombarded by spitballs. The school halls were battleground. We found ourselves outnumbered day after wretched day. We used to stay inside for recess because outside was worse. Outside, we'd have to rehearse running away or learn to stay still like statues, giving no clues that we were there in grade 5. They kept a sign at the front of her desk that read, "Beware dog." To this day, despite a loving husband, she doesn't think she's beautiful because of a birthmark that takes up a little less than half her face. Kids used to say she looks like a wrong answer that someone tried to erase but couldn't quite get the job done. And they'll never understand that she's raising 2 kids whose definition of beauty begins with the word mom. Because they see her heart before they see her skin, because she's only ever always been amazing. It was a broken branch grafted onto a different family tree. Adopted. Not because his parents opted for a different destiny. He was 3 when it became a mixed drink of 1 part left alone and 2 parts tragedy. Started therapy in 8th grade. Had a personality made up of tests and pills. Lived like the uphills were mountains and the downhills were cliffs. 4/5 suicidal, a tidal wave of antidepressants, and an adolescence being called pop. 1 part because of the pills. 99 parts because of the cruelty. He tried to kill himself in grade 10 when a kid who could still go home to mom and dad had the audacity to tell him, "Get over it." As if depression is something that can be remedied by any of the contents found in a first aid kit. To this day, he is a stick of TNT lit from both ends. Could describe to in detail the way the sky bends in the moment before it's about to fall. And despite an army of friends who all call him an inspiration, he remains a conversation piece between people who can't understand. Sometimes being drug-free has less to do with addiction and more to do with sanity. We weren't the only kids who grew up this way. To this day, kids are still being called names. Classics, way stupid. They spaz. Seems like every school has an arsenal of names getting updated every year. And if a kid breaks in a school and no one around chooses to hear, do they make a sound? Or they're just background noise from a soundtrack stuck on repeat when people say things like kids can be cruel. Every school was a big top service tent, and the pecking order went from acrobats to lion tamers, from clowns to carnies. All of these miles ahead of who we were freaks. Lobster claw boys and bearded ladies. Oddities juggling depression and loneliness, playing solitaire, spoon the bottle, trying to kiss the wounded parts of ourselves and heal. But at night, while the others slept, we kept walking the tightrope. It was practice, yes, some of us fell. But I want to tell them that all of this is just debris. Left over when we finally decide to smash all the things we thought we used to be. And if you can't see anything beautiful about yourself, get a better mirror. Look a little closer. Stare a little longer. Because there's something inside you that made you keep trying despite everyone who told you to quit. You built a cast around your broken heart inside of yourself. You decided there were more. Maybe you didn't belong to a group or a clique. Maybe they decided to pick you last for basketball or everything. Maybe you used to bring bruises and broken teeth to show and tell but never told. Because how can you hold your ground if everyone around you wants to bury you beneath it? You have to believe that they were wrong. They have to be wrong. Why else would we still be here? We grew up learning to cheer on the underdog because we see ourselves in them. We stem from a root planted in the belief that we are not what we were called. We are not abandoned cars stalled out and sitting empty on some highway. And if in some way we are, don't worry. We only got out to walk and get gas. We are graduating members from the class of We Made It. Not the faded echoes of voices crying out names will never hurt me. Of course, they did. But our lives will only ever always continue to be a balancing act that has less to do with pain and more to do with beauty.
All right. So, like I said, not much of a party. Overwhelmingly, folks' responses were sad, anger. Yeah, I know, work hard for the kids that we work with, for the adults that we work with. So if you all can just pay attention to that for a second. What I'd like you to do in this moment, and this is a brain science, this is the brain scientist nerd in me coming out. So what I'd like you to do is, I know there are some of you who are in a room and there are multiple people watching on smart boards. And if that's the case, then I want you all to do what I'm about to do with the physical people that are sharing the space with you, which is awesome. Like I said, I do this with my workshops. So most folks just shared that they were sad, and when they were thinking about that, they were having a mirror neuron experience with the other folks. So what I'd like you to do is, those of you who are on your own watching me, what I want you to do is to play a game of rock, paper, scissors with me right now. I will not know if you're cheating, and that's okay. So here we go. So it's gonna look like this. So it's gonna look like this. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're gonna show. Just to go over the rules in case you folks don't know, because culturally some folks don't know. So rock beats what? Rock beats scissors. Scissors cut paper. Paper cover rock. Okay, are you ready? All right, here we go. All right, you got this. All right, always throw a rock. Just kidding. Okay, you ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3, show. Okay, I don't know if you got me or not, but maybe you beat me, maybe you didn't. We're gonna try again. Best out of 3. You ready? 1, 2, 3, show. Oh, so good. So much skill in the house. I love it. Great. Okay, last time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I don't know if you won or not. I don't know. Maybe you can share it in the text if you won or not. But what I would like you to share out really quickly is, tied me each time. I see what you did there. That's good. How are you feeling right now? How are you feeling now? What's your body doing now? How are you feeling? All right, feeling better, smiling, laughing. Okay, the brain scientist in me wants to now tell you, like, this is a tool. Those of us that play games, whether it's in the classroom or out of a backpack or a kayak, or in a therapy session, the tools that we already know work, right? We already know that these things work, but think about them in a different way, right? So think about using a silly little game like rock, paper, scissors to change the mood, right? To set people up for, I'm gonna back out of that because I know you're looking at that. Look at me. To set people up for what you want them to be ready for, what you want them to do. Exercise and laughter release brain chemicals. So fight or flight stuff. If we're playing games mixed with laughter, you're talking about all kinds of healthy chemicals that improve mood, increase memory, increase retention, reduce anxiety. As someone who has dealt with anxiety and depression for most of my adult life, it works. I get up every morning and I get on my bike trainer if it's crappy outside, because I know that that's one way for my brain to like get what it needs to be level and to be happy. As teachers, we can do these little kinds of things, and most of us have been doing them for our whole careers, but not necessarily knowing why. Now the science is explaining to us that, like, this is why this stuff works. So John Dewey would say we would be practicing benevolent deception. We don't have to tell them what we're doing, but like we can still do it and set our students up for a successful session. Right, I want to move to the next slide. Great, sorry, that was a little fast. I need to slow that transition down. So what part of the video did you connect with? And it could either be what resonated with you or what you think would resonate with your particular clients. And it's okay to like bounce off of each other's, that's fine. And I just wanted to give us a couple of moments to check in on these things. What do you think your students would be? How would your students be reacting to this, whatever age? Go ahead. So this, like I said at the beginning, this is emotive, and it does really get conversation started. making those connections, finding that empathic connection with guided reflection, sort of like the experiential learning cycle, right? Like you could treat this as an experience and then have them reflect it. What some of the research is starting to show is, and the reason that my anti-bullying work is connected to empathy, is that the more connected we are to one another, the less likely we are to bully one another. And also the less likely we are to feel bullied. So it doesn't negate the fact that someone might still bully me. But if I know that they've got a really rough home life, or someone just died, they've got stuff going on, if I know that about them because my teacher has taken the time, or I've taken the time to reach out and get to know them a little better, when they come in and they're mean to me intentionally, then I'm a little more waterproof. It's able to let it slide off a little bit more. I'm not saying in any way that it is the victim's fault, so please don't hear that, because that's a big sort of pushback around a lot of anti-bullying work. But using these videos and activities to make connections that can then, like prescriptively, to then inform the conversations you have, and then, okay, what to do now? What to do when you see someone like this? Has anyone else felt like this? So at this point, I want to take the last couple, 2-3 minutes and open it up for questions and answers. I know that it's been kind of a whirlwind of 45 minutes, 50 minutes at this point, 55 minutes. Anybody have any questions, concerns, anything? Please let me know. And I'm happy. So Dan, yeah, so depends on the age group. I've shown this to 7th graders through high school and college. I think some of them are too emotive, I think, for folks younger than that, and also being really mindful of your population and how they would be affected. As many of you mentioned, the populations you're working with in a therapeutic setting, it might be really triggering. So being aware of, who's in your room, and going into it and anticipating the reactions. Person-to-person activities to help develop empathy. Absolutely. So thanks, Kathleen. So some of my favorite activities. I do one called Bodyguard. It's out of Project Adventure's Stepping Stones book. And I've got a really specific write-up on how to do it with to address empathy. And essentially, if folks aren't familiar with Bodyguard, it really, you have folks pair up, and one person volunteers to be the target and one person volunteers to be the bodyguard, and they're in the middle of a circle. And I usually use yarn balls, single yarn ball, and the bodyguard gets a chance to move around and protect the other person, while the folks in the circle gently try to tag them with the yarn ball. And then we give as many folks a chance to use that, to be in the middle as who want. They can switch roles once they get tagged. And then I have them go from pairs to quads with 3 bodyguards and 1 target. And then I go to 8s with one target and 7 bodyguards. And then I have it split the group in half, and half the group is 1 target with a bunch of bodyguards, and then everybody else is trying to get at that person. So it's a great way to tag that person. It's a great way to start talking about planning and what do we do, and how does it feel to protect someone? How does it feel to be protected? What made it work? Specific to my words, right? Tag, not hit. Target, not victim. Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting these materials. So yes, we're going to send them via email. And how would you handle the backlash where a teen would be borderline, what's formerly called Asperger's? Yes, right. I would, that's a tricky subject. So it depends on whether or not that person is, so whether their IEP is set up, whether they're set up, whether their classmates know what their condition is, where they are, what works for them, what doesn't. I've worked with many folks in various places on the spectrum, and oftentimes the most successful teams that I've worked with and schools that I've worked with have been really clear. So back to the basic underpinning of developing an empathic connection, if folks understand that the tone, tenor, and cadence might not, the impact might not reflect the intent, and that may be different from them, and that understanding can help them and modulate their behavior. So yes. Oh gosh, so David Heath presented something with sticky notes. Yeah, so that's another one of my favorites. That one's called Face Back. I use name tags now because they stick better. That's one that I will include as well. It's based on, it's sort of an old school debriefing tool where you put a piece of paper on someone's back and everyone in the group writes something nice about them. Face Back is my own creation, and the corny name is mine as well. I have to own that. What I have folks do is write a tweet or a Facebook wall post, something positive only, and I have them put it on their back, and then everyone in the room goes around and responds positively only. Then I have them look at them and report out, like, what was it like to read only positive things? What was it like to be anonymous, putting it on someone's back? And the next round I have them put them on their forearm so that they actually have to see the reaction of the person who's reading it. And that opens up the whole other conversation around why online and virtual bullying is different, like where that disconnect happens between having to connect with someone and the pain that you're causing them, or the joy, and not. It also allows to get at the conversation around the fact that just because something's easier to do online in terms of bullying, it also is easier to stand up to someone. So it can really get at the whole conversation of why people don't stand up more, why there isn't more upstanding behavior as opposed to bystanding behavior. And usually the answer is fear. So getting at these conversations as a way to then talk about what systems you have in place in your institution, or to inform maybe what you need to develop as an institution, school district, school, classroom, therapeutic organization. It sort of allows you to get at those pieces. Gosh, I think, God, what other activity? Folks, I'm not sure if folks are familiar with Hi, How Are Ya? I don't know if folks know that one, but it's a circle game where you walk out to the edge and you shake someone's hand and say, hi, how are you? And they say, fine, thanks. Hi, how are you? Fine, thanks. Hi, how are you? Fine, thanks. And they go around the circle, the outside, try to get back to the same place, but they have to greet everybody along the way. It's a really great way to see a group function and try to either sabotage someone to slow them down to get back to the circle, back to the beginning, or allow them to pass if they see that that person's struggling. I've got a write-up for that too. Outline the steps to build empathy. So I would say, Asperger's, they are coworkers at camp. Okay, I'll get to the Asperger's question in a moment. I want to go back up to the steps to build empathy. So I would say starting with building, get to know you at small steps, really small paired conversations, group conversations, low level in terms of anxiety producing ways for folks to get to know one another through paired activities, through playing games, those kinds of things where you can set and then demonstrate community norms, that you're going to hold them to the norms and have them help you create the norms, maybe create a full value contract or other social norm that's their words, not ours. We can help, and then have them through activity, through practice, then build on those norms And once they get to know one another and get to know that you are going to, they can trust you to help reinforce, they'll start reinforcing their own, including how we speak to one another, how we want to be treated, following the rules, taking our turns, all these basic things. That's the sort of the entry piece with building empathy, sort of in the Deweyan sense of benevolent deception. They don't necessarily know that that's what they're doing, but you can start there and then get into the deeper conversations. So in terms of the spokes with the coworkers at camp with Asperger's, I think if you can, the same thing what I was just talking about with getting folks to know one another, whether we're talking about youth or adults, the more information that folks have in terms of why someone behaves the way they do, the better off everyone is. And I know that's a really awkward, really challenging staffing conversation to have. And I'd say maybe start with the person who is on the spectrum and ask them how they, ask them what's going on for them when they, or maybe if they're triggered by a loud place or a loud situation, there are ways that perhaps you as an employer and a supervisor can set them up for success, maybe with some cues, but going to them as the expert in how they are responding to the stimuli around them, and maybe starting there. And if that doesn't work all the way or doesn't work enough, maybe then proceeding through the next step of working with the other staff members as well, either all together or separately, and that's really going to depend on the staff. I hope that helps. Okay. There was one up there that I said I'd go back to. Or was that the one? Yep.
The next question I see here is looking at if you have to restrain a student and processing that in an empathetic way. Any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not something that I've had to do in about 15 years. Wow. Yeah. I'm kind of at a loss, I got to tell you. I don't spend a lot of time working with environments. I don't spend any time, I'm not going to lie, working in environments where restraints are happening.
I may be able to speak to that just a little bit, having definitely had that experience when I was working with at-risk students with Outward Bound, and really identifying that restraints, like many other behavior management tools that we have, are triggered by very specific behaviors. You understand that this behavior is always going to result in the same response from a staff member. And when it comes to one-on-one conversations, when it comes to caring about your feelings, they can kind of be two separate things. And so the conversation about, yeah, how did it feel to be restrained? How does it feel to restrain somebody? Like it kind of sucks on both sides. What can we do? What can we do to avoid that situation in the past? Because I'll tell you exactly what behaviors you can exhibit that will get you restrained again. Yeah. And it's nothing personal, but it is my job to keep people safe. And this is how I'm going to do it. But when it comes to you being willing to disclose to me how you're feeling, I'm going to still be right there with you every time. And you really separate the behavior management from the personal interaction.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. Thank you for saying that. And that's definitely true. Separating the behavior from the person, because it may look and feel connected, but it isn't. And being really clear on the natural consequences, very much along the same lines of like when someone looks sad or looks happy, this is what we experience, this is what we do, letting them know that when you're exhibiting this behavior and I see this behavior in you or from you, then that's going to then elicit these steps. Is that, I think yeah. Awesome. Great.
Well, Jeff, I know we're getting close to 15 minutes over, and I appreciate you staying a little longer and
of course
these questions. Folks that are attending, I also really appreciate you all being here for this. Like I said, we think this is an important issue, and that's why AEE made it a priority to get this this webinar out there. And thank you This is the first webinar that made me cry, and I've been the moderator for a lot of these. So, and it also made me laugh out loud several times. So I very much appreciate your presence, your facilitation, and your dedication to this topic, Jeff. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks everybody for sharing online, and it makes the connectivity part of this possible.